such a great fresh perspective from the Indian side from Mr. Srinivas Kotni sir. And with that, we would like to invite our friend Mr. Jason from Anderson Kill in the US to hear from them that how this dual penalty tariff that we are seeing is panning out for our US friends there, and how do we see it happening in the long run. And with that, we turn over the next set of questions and the discussion to our friend. Good morning, Mr. Jason. How are you doing this great morning?
I'm doing great. How is everything going by you?
Everything is very well. We are just starting our Diwali breaks. So it's a wonderful discussion to have at this precipice, given the fact that we should be talking about how the tariffs have impacted the local industries, both here in India and US, and especially for the US Indians there at the brink of Diwali, how it is affecting the market. So we would love to know from you to begin with that if you could shed light that how the tariff imposition with India come to a standstill position as we see today, when both the countries have had such a good bipartisan relationship that was going on for probably 25, 30 odd years. And is this something which is the current administration thinking in terms of strengthening America first companies? Is it something that is going on with other countries parallelly as well?
So I think the current administration views that the Americas had a negative trade deal with many countries. It's not specific on India. There are tariffs against dozens of countries that are still in effect, and we have tariffs with Canada, our closest neighbor, our neighbors to the north. So it's definitely not an India specific thing. I think what the tariffs are being used for is a negotiating tool and a way to say that, look, it's a way to say we're going to punish your market and we're punishing our market at the same time. And the administration's hedging their bet that we can sustain the economic impact of the tariffs for longer than other countries, and that will allow us a strong bargaining tool that the current administration can use to get a more favorable trade deal.
Right. So when we talk about, let us understand from you. So when we talk about this reciprocal tariff that is happening on ground, how exactly are the American companies dealing with the reciprocal tariff that India has imposed on, let's say, the textile industry? Or how is it, how do you think that it is driving, or is it creating an impetus with the local industries there in America? Or there is a chance where we collectively should be focusing more on getting the negotiations back on the table and having the delegates of the two countries work towards something where the tariff imposition is reduced?
I agree 100%. I think there are definitely the industries are feeling the impacts of the tariffs, whether what we're exporting to India, and that's obviously being tariffed, and that's stopping, and what we're importing from India is facing tariffs, and companies are starting or trying to move away from the Indian market, and that's not possible in every industry. I practice a lot in construction litigation, and India is a major exporter to America of construction materials. That's bricks, that's wood. There are tons of materials that American companies need in order to continue, building in the country. So we get sandstone, granite, marble from India, and that it's causing price impacts on American companies because now we get the tariffs are being from India for exports to America, and what that does is it creates a significant supply issue in the United States. The American companies can't create the materials or don't have materials to satisfy the demand, and there's been incredible price increases on these materials that are really harming United States industries. So by getting the people back on getting delegates back on the drawing board is really what I believe as an attorney in the United States is necessary, and resolving this dispute is necessary to have both countries continue prosperity.
Absolutely. That is quite understandable. So when you say that the American companies are not able to sustain with the supplies that they are not getting from the Indian market, is America looking towards other markets? How are the tariffs working out with other countries for that matter?
So when in countries there are trade deals, there are a lot of orders going out to those countries. But what happens is that there are significant delays in the American market because those materials, let's say coming from the United Kingdom where there's a trade deal, are being held up in customs for a long time. And so because the customs has to inspect the materials, make sure it's not some kind of workaround where United Kingdom company in United Kingdom is shipping materials on behalf of a tariff nation. And then so there's a long inspection process that goes on in US ports, and that is causing significant delays to numerous industries in the United States. And a lot of times these materials are components of larger goods, and it's slowing down the production of the large goods that our citizens need.
Right. So, how is the American public and the companies they are dealing with this? What kind of legal mechanisms are you suggesting, or are these clauses that we are building into the contracts from the get go, or is there an effective dispute resolution in form of an arbitration or a discussion? How are we navigating this legal conundrum that we are in today?
So I think that in the beginning of the year, I started counseling my clients on contract and, modifying their contracts, especially, modifying force majeure provisions that will include for tariff delays. That way the companies aren't being held responsible for issues outside of their control. I think, we're also trying to force in no damages for delay causes, because even when there's no tariffs on a trade partner, that custom issue still occurs because there are tariffs in other countries. So even if the United States and India do come to a deal, which we're all hopeful within what I'm reading is either by the end of this month or the end of next month, it's supposed to be on there. Everyone's hoping it's on the horizon. While that's great for the markets, but there's still going to be the delays at the ports. While you have to worry about quitam and making sure that no one, that the materials are coming from a nation that there's no tariffs. That's still slowing it down. So you need no damages for delay causes. Another thing that we're counseling up our clients is to obtain appropriate insurances. There are insurance policies and insurance endorsements that provide coverage for this. For example, there's trade disruption insurance that does reimburse companies for supply chain disruptions and price increases. So I've been counseling my clients to try and either add an endorsement for trade disruption insurance or try and find a TDI standalone policy. There's also political risk insurance, which I've been a proponent of since, I guess, really since the beginning of the year when tariffs came, because it's inherently a political issue that our companies and your companies don't deserve to suffer based on this political dispute. And political risk insurance is a way to shift the burden to an insurance company. While it'll cost money in your premium, and you hope you never have to use it, but if you ever do have to use it, it's gonna put the money back in your pocket, and you're gonna protect yourself as best going forward. So I think it's a combination of updating, being in contact with your clients and updating the contracts and your insurance portfolio to best protect your clients' needs. That's what we're doing at Anderson Kill.
That is very wonderful to know. All the concepts that we had learned earlier on to foresee these things, to understand go at the very root of understanding the force majeure, understanding limitation of liability. So these are something that we have to be very particular about going forth. So one thing that was also in my mind, like when we talked about that, even if we do come to a consensus regarding the tariff, since the delay is there, how about the concepts of transshipments and the country of origin? What happens if the products are transshipped through another port? Is that something that could be advised to the companies? Because the question stems from the fact that while we do are blessed enough, and sometimes the legal in-house counsels for the big conglomerates can predict, have their compliances in check. What happens to the small time day-to-day traders? What kind of reliefs can we think for them, or what kind of teaching would this situation bring them so that they can preempt their liabilities down the road?
I think the problem with the smaller companies is that they don't have the ability to procure the type of insurances that we discussed. And it's unfortunately going to be, it's a learning experience where they're going to have to maybe late to the party, but get involved in drafting their policies, their contracts in a more proactive manner, and it's requiring small businesses to be more aware of what's going on, globally, and having to incorporate that and those risks and those harms into their day-to-day contracts. And it's expensive, but it's always nice to pay a little bit up front to protect yourself and paying a lot more down the road. So we are counseling smaller businesses to be aware, stay apprised of the current landscape and current issues that could affect their business, and draft their contracts with other companies to protect themselves.
Right. That is wonderful to know. So one thing that further that we would love to know from you is that how are we seeing today? So let's just assume that the political discussions regarding the tariffs, they do not go through together, they do not see a fruitful ending. Now, in that case, how do we see that this situation is it building innovation within the American traders? Are they doing, is there more scope for localization? Is that something that is being driven?
I think that it's trying to be driven. I think that there wasn't it's still in the early stages of ramping up. That when the tariffs happened, there wasn't a lot of pre-warning given to local suppliers, and a delay in ramping up production of materials. There's a delay of sourcing materials and having them in stock. And there now, as time passes, these issues are starting to be, they've been doing this for long enough that the supplies are starting to catch up, but it's never going to be enough locally to support such a large economy like the United States. There needs to be international supply and demand supplies in order to meet the demand.
No, absolutely. And to finally ask you, how is the stock market dealing with this? Like, are they looking for something that we have always read about is the taco movement that if the tariffs they go back, then the stock market doesn't suffer so much. So is it something, is it in the cards, or how is the stock market handling this entire tariff situation?
It's volatile to say the least. I mean, some days you're up and some days it goes down. I think whenever there's news of a new deal, the stock market does recover very well and it does go up. But as more time passes and no deals are announced, the stock market is taking hit. There's always an instant gratification in the market when a deal is announced with a country, no matter how large or small the country is, because the stock market believes that it's creating a more likely atmosphere for larger countries to have trade deals. If more and more trade deals are entered into, there's more of a format, there's more of a boilerplate that can be used and applied to other countries. I think the market's hopeful that when there are any trade deals, it will create a snowball or an avalanche of trade deals that will push everything to the future.
This is wonderful to know. What do you think we should be doing more and more to help our industry in this? And do you think that the whole concept of associations, they play a big part, even let's say before the Senate for that matter, in making claims that how the discussions should go? And how do you think the legal body can help further the discussions in a positive route?
I think the legal field has to be loud and just kind of. I think what the shift's going to be is when the insurance industry starts to feel the losses. And I work for a firm that, as a policyholder, we litigate only on behalf of policyholders, and we generally sue insurance companies. And there may be some bias there, but the insurance companies are the deep pockets, and they have the lobbying power in the country. They have lobbyists everywhere, and they work for the well for themselves. They get a lot of things passed. And if these insurance policies are purchased and are covered, and these losses become covered losses, and the insurance companies begin to lose money, I think there will be a concentrated effort to get at least people into the different governing bodies to get into force some kind of deals to go through, or to kind of get people to the bargaining table. And that's how we're going to resolve this, is getting delegates from every country, get delegates from countries together and sitting at a table and hammering out the differences.
No, absolutely. And because given the current scenarios that we are in, today it is one war which has led to this cascading effect. Tomorrow it could be something else. Just your parting words of wisdom, if I may, how do you think we should have a balance between the political relations and the principles of WTO over which we started? I mean, we do have the bilateral trade agreements, we do have the FTAs, we have our MFN clauses in place, but we do see that the geopolitical situation is still taking an upper side. How do we see a balance given the fact that we are just coming out of the brink of something and there might be few more? What would be your suggestions?
I mean, just again, I hate to repeat myself, but the best recommendation to me is to have airtight contracts, have airtight risk transfer provisions, and making sure your company is able to shift all risk to another party, and have the adequate insurance coverages. If there are policies in India that provide certain types of coverages that protect for political risk, companies should be using it and buying it, because this is what that kind of coverage is kind of exactly what it's being offered for. And I think there are definitely viable claims for companies, and that's the until there, until there's never going to be the perfect situation in the world that where the political risk is never going to be there. Having that as part of your insurance portfolio protects you for everything.
Right, absolutely. And just to understand from you, do you believe that international commercial arbitrations are the best legal solutions if it comes to resolving a dispute of such tariff nature, which affects, because there is no one thing to blame or no one party to blame? It is extraneous situations after all. So, do you think that arbitration or mediation and these alternate dispute resolution mechanisms are the best way to go ahead in these situations?
I think so. I mean, I think that's the argument of fairness. I think that's the most equitable way to resolve these. And I think that arbitration and mediation, at least in the United States, is much more cost effective than full on litigation. And I think that this, arbitration mediation kind of gets people to the table and to hammer out the issues, which is what our governments can and should be doing. And I think that the international arbitration allows, I mean, there's not as much favoritism there. It's not like it's not like you're litigating in America where there obviously there's the prejudice that maybe favor the American company, or you're not litigating in India where there may be the, I guess, suspicion that they're going to favor the company from India. I think if you go to mediation arbitration, you're agreeing on who's going to resolve the dispute. Each party can either appoint someone from their own country, and then there's someone in the middle, and that will have the middle ground and
Also, we,
kind
we
of
are
bridge the
always
gap.
governed by the answer troll, and obviously we get to choose which law that we would be, whether it will be the LCIA or the New York, or even for that matter, some people we do choose sometimes to counsel, let's go to DIFC altogether. And we have a completely neutral seat. And yes, absolutely. Right. We completely agree. And that is how exactly. And like you rightly, so wonderfully you put that the drafting of the contract is that of the masters at this point. And it might be easier for the big companies and the big conglomerates to have their compliance checks and risk assessments in place. But it is equally important for our local traders and the smaller industry players to have a very crystal clear and unambiguous contract in place. Wonderful. Thank you so much. This was absolutely wonderful, and we all hope that the tariff negotiations that we are seeing currently, and we are actually very grateful to both the countries who are constantly sending delegates to the United States, to India, to see that how this resolves and whether the initial bilateral trade agreement that was on the plate so far, for which the industrialists were waiting, that comes back up, and it would be a wonderful thing to unfold. Thank you so much
I
for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I entirely agree. I hope that everyone continues to work together and there doesn't become a time where people aren't sending their delegates. And the more time the delegates sit in a room together, the more likely we are to come to an agreement that everyone's gonna, benefit from, and both of our client bases are gonna benefit from. And that's really all that we should be worrying about, is keeping the dialogue open and keep moving things forward. And hopefully this gets resolved sooner than later.
Yes, absolutely. The more heads together at one table hashing things out, better than just being alone in a room any day.
Hmm.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jason, for joining us today. It was such a wonderful delight to be able to have this dialogue with you, to understand the scenario which our American friends are facing. And we would be grateful to host you sometime soon to our offices and vice versa, I hope. And have a lovely, lovely day. Lovely day ahead.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.